Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're going to be diving into something that literally changes the entire way we look at the modern workplace. For decades, human resources was basically treated like the complaint department, right? Or just the folks down in the basement who made sure your payroll went through. But today, we're exploring the human architecture of strategic integration. Think about how a successful business operates. It's a lot like an architectural blueprint. When you construct a building, you don't just, throw down some bricks and hope for the best. No way. Every single beam, every wire, every foundational pillar has to be deliberately integrated to support the whole structure. Well, the exact same principle applies to the people inside a business. So, we're going to use this blueprint metaphor today to explore the amazing evolution of HR, going from this detached administrative task straight to the absolute core of business strategy. Let's get into it. Let's kick things off with a pretty provocative question. Who is really in charge of HR at your company? For the longest time, if you asked anyone that, the answer was obvious. It was the folks down the hall, right? Totally isolated in their own little department, managing paperwork and benefits and, well, rules. But based on the research we're unpacking today, that old architectural model, it's completely obsolete. If you're still thinking HR is just some isolated silo, you are entirely missing the blueprint of modern competitive advantage. The answer to this question is shifting in a huge way, and it actually redefines the role of pretty much every leader in an organization. Section 1. The new architecture, the strategic HRM shift. To really wrap our heads around this paradigm shift, we first need to look at our new foundational blueprint for human resources. So, strategic HRM really boils down to two incredibly powerful concepts: integration and adaptation. In this new architectural model, human resource management absolutely cannot exist in a vacuum. It has to fully align with the strategic needs of the firm. Like, what does the company actually need to pull off? Where's it heading in the next 5 or 10 years? Strategic HRM adapts to those specific goals and integrates the human element directly into hitting those targets. It's not just about having a workforce anymore. It's about strategically designing that workforce to be the actual engine of your business strategy. Every single policy and practice has to deliberately serve the firm's biggest goals. Which brings us to Section 2, the competitive edge, compliance versus genuine commitment. Once you've got your human resources aligned with your strategy, the whole reason you manage people completely changes. Back in the old model, the baseline was basically just compliance. Acting like a corporate robot who punches the clock, blindly follows the rules, and essentially does just enough to avoid getting fired. But today, that is nowhere near enough to win. The source material makes it super clear that because people are what provide the actual competitive edge for a business, compliance just doesn't cut it anymore. The new strategic goal is genuine commitment. You're looking for employees who are intrinsically driven, genuinely dedicated to the firm's strategic needs. This is a massive, massive shift in our blueprint. You're not just playing police officer with behavior anymore. You are actively cultivating an environment where genuine commitment thrives. Why? Because that authentic dedication is literally the secret sauce that gives a firm its competitive edge in a super crowded market. Okay, Section 3. The real deliverers, managers as HR drivers. Now, if genuine commitment is the ultimate goal here, we've got to ask a kind of surprising question. Who actually makes this work on the ground level? Think of this like a chain of command. The flow of coherent policies starts all the way at the top with senior management involvement. Since these decisions are so highly strategic, they absolutely need the attention of top leadership. Then, from there, your HR specialists step in. They act like expert architects to actually design the policies. But here is where the blueprint flips. Those policies then have to be passed down to your everyday line managers. And it's on them to maintain total coherence by embedding these practices right into their team's everyday work. The policies can't just be sitting there collecting dust in an unread employee handbook, right? They need to be actively lived out every single day by managers and employees. And this whole system, it only works if the message stays totally coherent across every single one of those levels. I really want you to focus on this exact quote from the research. It says that HR cannot be left to specialists alone. Take a second and just let that sink in. Because these HR practices are absolutely central to a business succeeding, they simply cannot be siloed away in some detached administrative department anymore. Yes, the HR specialists are brilliant architects, for sure, but they aren't out there on the construction site every day actually laying the bricks. If these practices are going to be genuinely embedded into the everyday work, you can't just cross your fingers and rely solely on the specialist down the hall.
This kind of strategic integration requires a totally different kind of site manager.
And that's where things get really interesting. In this new human architecture, your everyday line managers aren't just there to oversee tasks. Nope. They've been handed a brand new burden, but also a huge new empowerment. They have new strategic roles. They have to act as the actual drivers and deliverers of the HR strategy. They're the ones right there in the trenches cultivating that genuine commitment we were talking about earlier. And crucially, as the source notes, this massive shift demands a much greater focus on managing the managers themselves. You've got to actively train, support, and integrate your line managers so they can actually succeed in this highly strategic role. They are quite literally the load-bearing pillars of this entire operational blueprint. Honestly, if they aren't supported, the whole structure just comes crashing down. So, I want to leave you with one final, pretty provocative question about your own everyday role. Are you just managing your team, or are you driving the strategy? If you're a manager at any level in your organization, this research speaks directly to you. You are not just an administrator of tasks. You are a central deliverer of human resource strategy. You're the one taking that blueprint and turning it into reality. So ask yourself, are you aiming for mere compliance? Or are you building that genuine commitment that's going to give your firm its ultimate competitive edge? Definitely something to think about as you go back to your teams today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, keep building that strategic architecture.